I'm going to ask that we all bow our heads in prayer.
Just start rattling off all the bad things I've done till you get tired of hearing about it, or what?
I'm going to talk to you about the judge of the fatherless.
I'm sure he doesn't mean to be so difficult, Mrs. Cleaver. It's just that he's at the age where he doesn't realize how important it is to keep a promise.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, Eugene Bach from Back to Jerusalem.
Thanks, Dad.
So glad to have you here. Since the last time you were on, we changed our branding. So this is the Faith of the Fathers podcast. And the reason we're doing that is because I'm trying to reignite the calling of men in the world, that there aren't enough. The fatherlessness of men has really left us with a terrible vacancy of leadership. And so one of the reasons I wanted to have you back on the podcast is because I think your life is inspiring to me, and I know it is to many others. You kind of live like a James Bond mission type of life. At least that's the way it comes across. You travel all around the world as more of an assistant to Asian and Middle Eastern missionaries, but you also have a history of being in the Marine Corps, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit today, or wanted you to talk about that. You shared something really horrific on your podcast, which is the Back to Jerusalem podcast, which I encourage everybody to check out. But recently you shared this horrific story about something our military was ordered to do in Afghanistan, which you say contributed, really is the reason we failed in Afghanistan. And I'd like for you to share with us about that. But before getting there, I would love to just start with your journey to faith, and then your journey into the military, because I want people today to see the good that can be done for the kingdom of God through the military, and also the ways that us leaning on the military to do the work of the kingdom can be a great mistake. So I know that's a lot, but just to kind of lay out the framework of basically where I'm going with this today, could you begin with just sharing with us a bit of your personal testimony and why you went into the military and what that was like for you?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for letting me be on your podcast again, brother. It is always so good to see you, hang out with you. I think that you and I are kind of on that same line. I think that we see the world through that same lens, and it's not our lens. I don't even think it's our cultural lens. I think I would hope it's a kingdom lens. So it really is a breath of fresh air to be back with you. So thank you for that. If I do seem like a double agent or like a 007 type of agent, trust me when I say that I'm more like Mr. Bean than I am 007. I'm kind of his version of being a secret agent. I'm surrounded by a lot of great people. I have a lot of ambitions. I have a lot of ideas, a lot of kooky ideas, weird ideas, and I'm just stupid enough to go ahead and do them. But I really am surrounded by amazing people that I call friends, individuals that I would give my life for, and I think they would do the same for me. And they kind of keep me on that track. And a lot of the mistakes that I've made along the way, they are there to pick up the pieces and kind of carry out the intention, even though I lack the ability to. So my background specifically is in the U.S. military. I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school. It was all I wanted to be in life. I didn't want to be anything else, just a U.S. Marine. I think that I will cause a lot of shock with individuals, and probably people will disagree with me when I say that I believe that the Lord called me into the military. My in-laws, my wife grew up in a family where that would not be a sentence that you ever say. They are conscious objectors, and they believe that Christians should never, ever touch a weapon. So when I say that God called me in the military, I think that there's a big part of them that scoffs at that idea. But I feel very strongly that God did indeed call me to the military. I went into basic infantry. So I was an infantryman in the Marine Corps. We say that everything in the Marine Corps surrounds infantry. It's there to support infantry. And that's kind of how I live life in the ministry. It was very much taught to me by the Marine Corps. It is we say that, the United States needs an Air Force. They need an Army. They need a Navy. They don't need a Marine Corps. but they want a Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is not a part of the military. It's a cult. We say that these are guys that drink blood to get into a secret brotherhood. It is a small group. It is the smallest branch of the U.S. military, and we work on the smallest budget. We are not even an official branch by ourselves. We're a department of the Navy. But within that branch of the Marine Corps, we do have a very tight brotherhood, and the more you go into special units, the tighter that brotherhood gets. So I had the opportunity to become a part of 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines Stay Platoon, Strategic Target Acquisition Platoon, which is another word for saying scout sniper. So I was a scout sniper for the United States Marine Corps, and we had a platoon of 10. So we were a very small unit, very small group. We were very tightly knit, and that was my background. Until God called me out, that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I do believe that influences much of what I do today on the field. I just came from Iraq yesterday, arriving here in Dubai, where I'm at now, and I spent the last week in Iraq. And what was amazing is I was able to sit down with the commander of all the Peshmerga forces. For those that are familiar with Iraq, Peshmerga forces are the ones that are in charge of the military regime in the northern part of Iraq. They're the ones that removed ISIS. They're the ones that removed Saddam. They are our closest allies in the Middle East. They are fierce warriors, very similar to the IDF or the Israeli Defense Forces or the IDF. These guys are amazing soldiers. So to sit down with the commander of all the Peshmerga forces was quite amazing. He hosted us at his house. And as we're at his house being hosted by him, we're sitting there watching smoldering of bombs that were dropped by Turkey to kind of intimidate the Peshmerga because of the PKK, which are the Kurds on the other side of the border in Turkey. So when rebels leave from Turkey, go into Iraq to hide from Turkey, the Turkish government likes to send in planes dropping bombs to let them know that we are still able to reach out and touch you. So to sit with the Peshmerga and watch those bombs take place, I'm like, I could have been doing this very easily in the Marine Corps. So I think that the Marines, I know that a lot of people are prepared for ministry through going to different like Bible seminaries or Bible schools, Bible colleges. Thanks to all of those American taxpayers that paid for my missionary training.
That's good. So you were a Christian when you went into the military?
I was, and I ministered. I preached almost every week. I held Bible studies on ship, in foxholes, in trenches, in the Middle East, in America, in Asia. I traveled around the world, oftentimes in dangerous areas. Some areas were more dangerous than others, depending on how you calculate danger. We had individuals that got liberty. We call it liberty when you go out on it's like a little bit of time off. So when we would pull into a port like Bangkok, Thailand, for instance, we had individuals that would go out and have premarital sex with hookers, come back with diseases, and all of a sudden they want to repent for their sins and become a Christian. It was a great opportunity to minister. Whenever we were in a situation where people were a little bit more worried about their safety, there was a lot of response for having Bible studies. They often say that there's no atheist in a foxhole. I truly believe that. And so the military, unlike what you see in movies, I would say that the military by and large is a lot more Christian than what you would get at a lot of state schools, even conservative state schools, and in some cases maybe even in certain Bible schools.
Wow.
I don't know if so. I think it was it Princeton or Harvard, one of these two places, for their theological seminary, they brought in an atheist. So I would say that we probably in the military have a lot, especially in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps brings in a certain breed of individuals. Many of them are very much traditionalists, and they believe in God, country, and family. And so many of them listen to country music, for instance. And I'm sorry, whether you like country music or you don't like country music, whether you believe it's a sin or you don't believe it's a sin, it does do. There's a lot of messages in country music about God, country, and family. And so we get a lot of that in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that the Marine Corps, not to bash on any other branch, my oldest son is right now in officer training for the U.S. Marine Corps. My youngest son is in officer training to be an officer in the Air Force. So, I mean, I love all branches of the service, but when it comes to conservatism, the Marine Corps is by far the most conservative. And you see that across the board, whether it's women in the military, whether it's homosexuals in the military, whether it's, even before I got married, I needed to go through counseling with my senior staff before they would approve it. I think most military branches would consider that to be a bit absurd, but the Marine Corps considers it to be a necessity. You can also be charged in the Marine Corps for having an affair, having sex outside of marriage, having an affair with another Marine's wife. All of these are chargeable offenses in the Marine Corps. I'm sure that they are in the other services as well, but in the Marine Corps, this is very tightly adhered to. We have a very tight clinging to tradition.
When I see on TV, it seems that the whole military is being wokeified in, with as fast as they could possibly do it. But obviously you have two sons in the military. You must not believe that it is as bad as maybe TV makes it look. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on a Christian joining the military today?
Well, I mean, I have mixed emotions about it. If I could choose for my boys not to go into the military, I would probably do that. But I'm very proud that they are. It's in their blood. I can't take it out. I wish that I could, but I can't. I did a lot to kind of not share too much about the military, but they pick up on everything. Both of my boys are super honorable individuals. And when I look at it, I see that the military needs young men like my boys. I think the military needs more individuals that have a very strong moral compass. The officer branch is much different than the enlistment branch. For those that are not familiar with the military, there are two streams of military service. One is the officers and one is enlisted. Enlisted are like your blue collar workers, and the officers are like your white collar workers. The officers are all college educated, whereas most of your enlisted are individuals that come right out of high school, like myself. I was a thick-headed, right out of high school, not ready for college individual, plugging straight into the Marine Corps, whereas my boys are both very intelligent, a lot smarter than me, and they're definitely officer material. They speak different languages, and they've been educated overseas and had a lot of exposure to different cultures, especially being dual citizens of both Europe and America. They carry multiple passports, and they grew up in Asia. So they have a lot more to offer the military. And there's a lot of Christians that might be listening to this that are thinking about joining the military. And I'm saying that the military needs you. They're in the officer stream, which is much different than the enlisted. What I just described to you about conservative Christians, that's mainly enlisted individuals that are God, country, family. But when you get into the officer branches, you have a lot of politicking. Individuals that are trying to make a name for themselves by doing very cutting edge type of liberal policy making. And that can get them noticed in today's military. I'm going to be very blunt about it. If you want to be promoted in the officer corps in the military, it's good that you either have a vagina or a little bit of melatonin in your skin. That is a very strong requirement right now in the military, and unfortunately, that a lot of people are promoted on that basis. That's an extremely dangerous policy, because the military, by and large, especially the Marine Corps, is a meritocracy. And so everybody that I served with, whether they were female, whether they were minority, whether they were black, white, Asian, purple, we all got to our positions by earning it. When you start promoting individuals without earning it, you get into very dangerous water, because then you have very incompetent individuals that were promoted. And we got away from that. It was one of the benefits of moving away from the British military. The British military selected their officers according to royal bloodlines. And royal bloodlines are not always capable of being the best leader. Sometimes your best leaders are individuals that are not from royal bloodlines. So one of the great things that has always made America great is that we didn't have that royalty. We had individuals. If you wanted to be a leader, you had to prove that you were a leader. If you wanted to be a Stonewall Jackson, you had to be a Stonewall Jackson. If you wanted to be a Robert Lee or a Grant, you had to fight to make your way up and prove yourself on the battlefield. What we just saw in Afghanistan, I believe, was a complete failure of a system that is based on merit, that is not based on meritocracy. That is based on individuals being promoted, individuals being in charge based on some other attribute which is not controllable.
It's not their character.
So yes, my boys are fighting against that. And my only advice to them was pray to God to give you favor so that you can be a Daniel in Babylon, so you can be a Meshach, Shadrach, or Abednego in Babylon. And if they require that you get a higher score, a higher PFT score, that you perform better in order to even be in the competition, then you do better. If you have to cross a higher line, jump over higher hurdles, then do it without complaining. And that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, would you agree? It seems to me that as a church, and I'm guilty of this too, we have taken for granted, we've been kind of overly pious about the military, kind of like we're above it. And that yet when we have a crisis, we're always thankful. I mean, when churches today secure their buildings, they're usually drawing from law enforcement and ex-military to be people in charge of security because they know they can depend on them. They're also some of the most, they have more integrity than most in that they were taught that if you have an order, you carry it out no matter what. And we will, even to your own hurt, which is something really that comes from Jesus, that a leader serves even to the point of death. As a matter of fact, you can't really see it on here, but I'm wearing a shirt that is for the Thin Blue Line, which says, "No greater love has no man than this, than that he lay down his life for a friend." Because this is September 13th, a year ago and three days ago, my cousin Ryan was shot and killed. And that is what we were all saying was and he is actually, he was a Marine as well. And he had such a reputation for dependability. And that's something you don't hear people saying necessarily about church leaders today. We don't look at a pastor and automatically assume we can trust them anymore. We used to, but we don't. And that's something that that should be a warning, I think, to us as a church of the character we're lacking, and maybe we shouldn't be so high and mighty when it comes to our attitude toward the military.
I think it's very interesting when looking at the honor, the commitment, the code, the ethics of those that serve in military and those that serve in law enforcement, because it's a chicken or egg kind of question, right? Did they join the military because they already had something in them that had that moral code, that desire, that ethical system? Or did the military give them that? I have to say many of the people that I served together with had that code, and it was massaged and fed and grew in the military, reinforced in the military, but it was already there. And the military also, when people look at the Iraqi military, when they look at the Afghani military, I think that they can really see the difference of an American military individual and an Iraqi or an Afghanistani military individual. Because the Afghani military and the Iraqi military, they get their ethics, they get their values, they get their moral compass from a different book. And because it comes from a different book, they have a different system, which means that when their life is threatened, when their families are threatened, they flee, they hide, they run, they cheat, they scandal. And when the American military, in at least in the circles that I served in, of course, What I'm saying here can have examples where they prove me wrong, but the overwhelming majority of the individuals that I served together with would stand and fight until death if they were given that order. And they would stand and fight till death if it meant protecting the man to the right, the man to the left, or the innocent civilian behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that many of the people that served in Afghanistan and Iraq and Vietnam, or these other places, they fought not only because they believed in the American values, but they fought to protect those that they were not related to in different countries. And they gave their life not just for the Americans, but for the Afghanis, for the Iraqis.
You said that a lot of the people you served with came to the military with that character, and the military groomed it and encouraged it. So the question then becomes, where did it come from originally? Where would you say that, where does the military find these people of character?
Yeah, so for me, I became a Christian when I was 14 years old, but I had a desire to serve in the military long before that. And I don't think that, I know this is going to sound laughable, but I don't think it is. In the Christian world, we have a certain, we have certain entertainment that we enjoy. And the entertainment that I really enjoyed was Little House on the Prairie. Charles Ingalls was a father figure for me. He made a huge deposit by watching him protect his family. I was one of the people that cheered when I saw that his wife, was being grabbed by some frisky men, and they kind of touched her inappropriately. Charles Ingalls takes a club and goes knocking on some doors, ready to crack some skulls. And he did. And I identified with that. I think that we all identify with that. When you are exposed to a gospel society, even though I didn't grow up in a Christian family, I lived in a society that was influenced by the gospel. And there's a couple of things that come along with that infusion of the gospel into your society, into a Christian Judaic society. Whether your listeners agree with this or not, whether my listeners agree with this or not, I believe that there are certain characteristics that are infused that you inherit. You inherit, among all of the other things that you inherit, I believe, is the desire to protect those that are vulnerable. I think that there becomes a desire to protect the damsel in distress. There is a very strong characteristic of chivalry that is lacking in the rest of the world, and you don't know that until you are exposed to the rest of the world. One of the things that broke my heart more than anything, serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, is how many refugees that fled from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, that were men, married men, that had women and children, that cried about their families leaving them behind, but it didn't stop them from leaving, and it didn't compel them to stay and fight. There was not this idea of save the women and children first, and I'm going to sit and fight for my land. Instead, there was a very strong feeling of, I need to get safety. And then once I get safety, I will bring my wife and child here with me once I'm safe. This is something that I think I would get attacked on very quickly, but I've seen it repeatedly. And growing up in the American society, that idea of chivalry appealed to me, not hate. I didn't have a very strong desire to want to kill people or annihilate people because of hate, which is what I believe draws the recruitment for other nations that are not Christian Judaic. But instead, I had a very strong sense of duty, a very strong sense of chivalry, a very strong sense of protecting those that can't be protected, to be a part of the larger apparatus, not individually perhaps, but the larger mechanism of protecting those that can't protect themselves. Does that make any sense? Mm-hmm. So when I heard the call to join the military, I felt that sense of duty. and I wanted to be a part of that group. And it wasn't a part of my natural character, perhaps, but maybe it was a bit of both. I do believe I was born to do it. I believe I was very good at it. I think strategy is one of my gifts. I really do. I know that might sound odd to some listeners, but I really do think military strategy is one of the things that I enjoyed. I was able to shine when I was in the military. I got promoted very quickly. I was meritoriously promoted twice to both corporal and sergeant. I was a sergeant before I was legal to drink alcohol, which is unheard of in a grunt unit in the Marine Corps. So it was something that I felt very gifted at, and I proved myself time and time again. And so when you ask me where did that come from, that's the long version.
You had said what I expected, though. Ultimately, it's the father figure. It's the male calling to protect that inspires and shapes that kind of character, which is, again, why fatherlessness has been so devastating. I want to get to this thing that happened in Afghanistan, and really, I've heard very few things that have made me more shame-faced as an American than what you share. But I think also by you sharing it, I think it will show a contrast to the good things. It'll show, in the past, the American military has done a lot, I believe, to advance the gospel in various ways. The example you're going to give us is a negative one. But I think, the contrast of dark to light will be there, as well as the contrast between military personnel, those who make up the soldiers, and then the political side of it that seems to be dominating at the moment. But share with us what you shared on your podcast about what our military did in 2009 in Afghanistan.
Yeah, this is something that a lot of Christians are just simply of. I think that there is this desire to attack, especially for a lot of Christians that supported President Trump. I think that there is a very strong desire to attack Biden and to say all of the bad things that Biden has done. However, if we are to be honest, I believe that the Afghanistan was lost probably from beginning of the invasion. And one of the reasons why that is, if you can hear this like ringing sound in the background, it's ringing. I apologize for that. I won't answer it, not while I'm on the podcast. They'll probably just keep calling back. But one of the things that I think is important for Christians to understand is that the gospel and Jesus alone are the bedrock for free societies around the world. No matter what we do, no matter what we invest, no matter what we put into the secret sauce, we are completely 100% incapable of building free societies or having free societies around the world without the gospel. And so the reason why I believe that we have failed, and I say we as an American citizen, is because we backed a government that persecuted Christians. And when Christianity was being brought into Afghanistan, the American military actively stopped it. And one of the examples that I give, which I think is probably one of the most notable and disgusting of them all, is that when the Taliban fell in Afghanistan, we did all of the things, right? Yeah, we brought in the world's best consultants. We poured in billions of dollars. We trained their military with the best military that we had to offer. We brought in the world's best equipment. We built schools. We gave girls freedom. We implemented democracy. We did all of the things that, we believed represented freedom. And yet, it was all a house of cards that as soon as America was pulled out, it all collapsed. Why? Well, one of the things that took place in 2009 which is, you can look this up. It was that you can actually do a Google search if you don't believe what I'm about to say. It was the Bagram Bible burning. You can put that in. It was an event that actually has its own Wikipedia page. And what I'm sharing with you was not shared on like some backroom website or the dark web. This is CNN reporting. This is BBC. What happened was, there was a period of time in 2008 and 2009 when the military was supposed to be on an operation to win the hearts and minds. That was the real problem, right? The government said, okay, what we see is now more clear. The reason why Afghanistan has not transformed in the last 7 years that we've been there is because we've been there as the big bad military wolf. And we've been bringing guns and bombs and threatening people. If people felt less threatened by the U.S. military, maybe they would be more open and accept the freedom that we've brought. By the way, we were not occupiers. We were occupiers. We'd be given spankings and we'd be taking out the resources of the country to benefit ourselves, and we weren't. We would be charging taxes to the people of Afghanistan. We weren't. We would be appointing governors, not presidents, and we weren't. We would be doing a lot of things as occupiers, but we weren't. We were dying to give the Afghanis Afghanistan. Give them freedom. Give the women freedom. Give the people freedom. Give the children freedom. That's what we were doing. So any crap that you hear about, this is just a way for, a new colonialism, that is absolute crap, garbage. The U.S. military was sacrificing their lives to give freedom to the Afghanis. And maybe the Afghanis didn't want it. So what the U.S. government and all their divine wisdom decided to do in 2008 was, let's win the hearts and minds. And instead of walking around, threatening people with guns, how about we build schools and let the U.S. military become humanitarian workers? And let the U.S. military, instead of being a police, they will start handing out candy, handing out gifts, smiling, being a part of education programs, being a part of a community network. So all of these like social worker skills were given to the U.S. military, which I think is a bad idea from the beginning. But we did it. So when the U.S. military began to engage with the locals said what? The locals said, hey, can you give me a Bible? Do you know how many Afghanis were looking at America and saying, wow, you guys have wealth, you guys have freedom, you guys have everything that we want. How can we get what you have there and bring it here to us? Well, one of the things that you have is a different God. What if it's your God that's given these amazing things to you? What if we can learn about your God and he would give the same amazing things to us? Makes sense to me, right? I mean, if your neighbor has an amazing yard and your yard looks like crap, maybe you want to find out what fertilizer he's using. Maybe you want to find out what technique he's using. Maybe you want to find out what he's doing that you're not. That's what the Afghanis were doing. So they came to some of the soldiers and they said, hey, can you get us Bibles? So many of these soldiers began to write home to their churches saying, hey, we've got people here asking for Bibles. Would it be possible for you to send Bibles to us? So churches responded in large numbers to their soldiers on the ground. Can you imagine yourself being in a church service where the pastor stands up and says, Johnny from our congregation has asked us to send Bibles. How many people here can send Bibles next Sunday? So many people would respond, and they did. So Bibles began to be sent at the request of the Afghanis. Should they have been handed out by soldiers? That's another argument, not one that I'm willing to defend right now. But I can tell you that the soldiers were doing what they felt was right, and they were given this role as a humanitarian worker, not a soldier. So that's where the confusion starts to come in. Those soldiers got caught handing out Bibles, and as soon as the command got a whiff of it, they said, no, you cannot do this. So the U.S. military commanders began to demand that all of the Bibles be rounded up and burned. You're talking thousands, and it was caught on camera. Now, somebody went and asked the U.S. military, why is it that you burn the Bibles? Can you imagine? I mean, just think for a minute. Can you imagine any scenario where the U.S. military would have rounded up thousands of Qurans and set them on fire? Heck no. Not in a million stinking years would they have done that to the Quran. So they asked the U.S. military, why did you do this? Why did you burn the Bibles? And the U.S. military, they said, wouldn't it be possible for you to just have sent those back to the churches? And instead of saying that, okay, yeah, we should have sent those back to the churches, the U.S. military command said that they wanted them burned for fear that if those Bibles were sent back to the churches might have turned around and sent them to another organization. Which tells me that the U.S. military command was given a rule, or some of them maybe felt it specifically, and this was a direct quote from a top commanding general, that if we send the Bibles back, they will just be sent to another organization. With that being said, that means that they didn't want the Bible there at all. The reason why that's a problem is because that was a part of supporting an Afghan government that persecuted Christians. We came up with Operation Black Trumpet, which is to help get Bibles into the hands of Afghanis. Not because of the Taliban, but because of the Afghan government that America was supporting. When you actively support a government that keeps out God, that persecutes those that chase after God, brother, there's no freedom there. Afghanistan was without freedom long before America left. The government was doomed long before America left because they kicked out God and persecuted those that followed him. The Bible says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is not, there is not freedom. That second part, of course, I just deduced from the first part. It's not a biblical concept, but it's a concept that I can deduce from the first part. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Ergo, where the Spirit of the Lord is not, there is not freedom. The Spirit of the Lord was not welcome in Afghanistan, and as a result, I believe that there's no freedom. So right now we see women suffering, children suffering, people suffering in Afghanistan, not because Biden pulled out, but because the U.S. government, you, me, we supported an administrations that found it okay to kick God out and persecute Christians. That is the real reason I believe Afghanistan has fallen. Now we can find many other things that are kind of like the signs of it fallen. We can talk about the engagement of China and China's support of the Taliban. We can talk about the bass-backwards way in which Biden did his pullout. We can talk about Trump. We can talk about Obama. We can talk about Bush. We can talk about the American strategy or the lack thereof. We can talk about what went right and what went wrong. But at the end of the day, the root cause in my belief is that when God was kept out, the country was doomed. This is the real reason why we are preaching the gospel in the 1040 window, brother. This is the real reason why we bring the gospel, because I believe that I can bring more freedom as a missionary on the ground than I could as a soldier. That when I go into a country and I want to see more human freedoms and I want to see more rights for the people and more animal rights and more women's rights and more education and a better life and a lower misery index level, I believe that the best way to do that is to bring the gospel. If I want to see the people be free, bring the gospel. If I want to see the situation for people to get better, bring the gospel. Only Jesus can make a difference. I know that comes down to a cheesy line, but it's true.
Well, I think the deduction from that also is that America's freedom is doomed if we do not return to Jesus as a culture. It needs to be more than me. It needs to be more than my family. It needs to be the nation, or our freedom is doomed. So I know we could talk some more, and I'd love to get you on again, but just wrapping up for today with this, that's a really heavy thing. Solutions, responses, what are constructive responses? Because it's so easy to get angry and just say the world's going to hell in a handbasket, which I think is the devil's answer. Honestly, that's what he wants us to believe, because then it teaches us to do nothing. What are constructive responses and solutions to this?
That's a really good question. For me, it is the very central message of the gospel. What Jesus taught, and he used so many illustrations to teach. It's the same thing that I would say for those that are looking for end times. When they think about the fall of America, they think of doom. When they think about the increase of evil in the world, they think about the end times. They think about the Antichrist. They think about the Armageddon. They think about the mark of the beast. And there are so many practical things that I think we can occupy our minds with. They say that we need to do this to prepare and we need to do this to prepare. But I believe we only need to do one thing. And it's very simple. To do that which the Father has told us to do. To make ourselves busy at all times, carrying out the will of the Father. If the Father returns back, he wants to see us doing what he has called us to do. We should be caught in the middle of preaching his word. And I believe that those believers that are clinging to the hem of his garment, those believers that are crying out to him, they are the remnant that is withholding judgment. They are the lots and those that Abraham was looking for to save Sodom and Gomorrah. If it's only for a few families, I believe that God will hold back his wrath. So if we want to see America from going into the abyss, I think that we as a church, not criticizing everybody else, but we need to have revival in our families and see that revival spread to others and just go about the Father's work. When it comes to places like Afghanistan, when it comes to places like Iraq, I just came from Iraq. I believe that we need to invade the enemy's territory, not with soldiers, but with missionaries, not with bombs, but with Bibles. I believe that we need to go to the front lines and invade darkness with light. We need to transform the hearts from the inside out and not from the outside in. We need to listen to the words of the Great Commission in Acts 1:8, Matthew 28:18 and 19. We need to believe firmly and act on the idea of Matthew 24:14. This idea that Jesus will return when all nations and people groups have heard the good news. What are we doing to complete the Great Commission? May God return back and find us busy doing that very thing. That's practically, I believe that's what we need to do.
Amen.
Without any strategy, without any, counting the blood moons or calculating how many times a certain Hebrew letter pops up in every chapter of all the Old Testament and divide it by 6 and multiply it by 4. I don't believe that there's any square root of, different years that will tell us when the end is coming. We just need to occupy ourselves with completing the Great Commission and spreading the good news all around the world. That's practically what I believe.
Yeah, and I know Back to Jerusalem is doing many practical things in delivering Bibles in both, traditional book form and also digital form. And you guys also created Ding Dash, which is a free speech social media platform. So I encourage our listeners and those viewing today to visit backtojerusalem.com. Also, Eugene, you travel around and speak sometimes, as well as Brother Yoon when I don't know what things are like in Germany as far as traveling goes or how he's traveling today, but I know you guys will both go out and speak. So how can people get a hold of you?
Very easy. They can just write to us at info@backtojerusalem.com or office@backtojerusalem.com. That'll put them in touch with those that put our tours together. I'm more than willing to speak, but Brother Yun is just such a dynamic speaker. If you can get him into your meetings, that will just be a blessing to you. Next year, we will be doing a very special tour specifically with an amazing warrior. Her name is Miriam Ibrahim. Her book comes out March 8th of next year. That's International Women's Day. I'm going to be traveling around with her, setting up that tour. I'm the one that wrote her book, her testimony. And if there's anybody listening that would like to book her for that time, we would love to come and visit your church for her to share her amazing story of being arrested and thrown in prison in Sudan for her faith.
Yeah, we would love to have her come by here. So I'll be talking with you in a minute. So thank you, Eugene, for sharing, and thank you for all the work that you do. You're an encouragement to me, absolutely.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate this time. God bless you.